All right, we're back on the record, and everybody's ready to proceed. So continue with the adverse examination of Mr. Smith. Go ahead, Mr. Sultan.
Mr. Smith, did there become a point in time in which you learned that Mr. Buford had filed a charge of discrimination with the Wisconsin Equal Rights Division?
Yes.
And did there come a point in time in which the Equal Rights Division asked you for a response to Mr. Buford's complaint?
Yes.
And you chose not to file a response?
It's not true. I reached out to legal counsel, and legal counsel would have responded on the behalf of Associates Building Maintenance.
Okay. What did Willie Buford do for Associates Building Maintenance?
Willie Buford was the first shift supervisor over both the 29th Street location and the 53rd and Capitol Drive location. And his duties included making sure that we had supplies in the buildings, that the parking lots were plowed, that just anything that any reporting that needed to be reported was being done on behalf of the school to the licensing for their early childhood development programs, and just day to day, just overseeing day to day, making sure that the maintenance staff was in the building and everyone was doing what was expected of them.
Now, Associates Building Maintenance had a contract with Next Door Foundation, correct?
That is correct.
And I'd like to show the witness complainants exhibit number 1.
Hey, 1 second. All right, we're doing complaints exhibit 1. This was not marked at the first day of hearing. Okay. This is very annoying. It won't copy, so I have to write it down. Okay. All right, I've now marked complaints exhibit 1, which is the ABEM Next Door contract. And it's on the screen. And where do you want it to be?
If you could go to the second page, please. ERD 002.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Smith, are you able to see Exhibit 1?
I am.
Do you recognize Exhibit 1?
I do.
Tell me what it is, please.
It's a contract between Associates Building Maintenance and Next Door Foundation.
I'd like to move the admission of Exhibit 1.
Any objection?
I'm sorry, I did not hear whether there was an objection.
Yes, I'm waiting. You're muted.
Excuse me, Your Honor, I need to look through this. It's a whole contract. One of our clients' issues was, and this whole thing was not disclosing certain proprietary information. I need to look at this really quickly before, it's a whole document that's,
No, this has been a document that's been submitted since the first day.
If you want, Tim, I can use the respondent's exhibit instead. I'm happy to do that.
Did you redact the respondent's copy?
I don't believe it is redacted.
Well, then what's the difference between the two if they're both not redacted?
all right, Your Honor. I got a chance to peruse through it. No objection.
All right. Complaints Exhibit 1 is offered. And it is admitted. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Sorry, could you scroll to ERD 005?
Is that part of this contract?
Yes, ma'am.
1 second. Making the contract big again so you can see it. If this makes you seasick, don't look and just wait till we're done getting to the right page. Okay, we are now scroll down to ERD 005. Can
Could you
see
scroll
that?
down to the bottom half of the page, please?
Okay. Tell me when you want me to stop.
Stop, please. Mr. Smith, are you able to see ERD 005 where it says number 2, staffing and transition?
Yes,
Okay. And you're familiar with this contract, yes?
I am.
Okay. If you look under where it says the heading cleaning staff, it says cleaning staff members are professional cleaners in bold. Do you see that?
That is correct. I do.
And that's true. You require your cleaners to be professionals, right?
That is correct.
And when you say professional, you mean industry standards, correct?
That is correct.
All right. And that provision goes on to say who go through extensive training both on the job and in classroom instruction, correct?
That is correct.
And then the next heading underneath that is quality supervision. All associate building maintenance supervisors are veteran cleaning professionals. Do you see that?
That is correct.
And that was true for Mr. Buford, correct?
That is correct.
If we could turn to ERD 006, please. The bottom half of the page.
Tell me when to stop.
Stop, please. Mr. Smith, the bottom half of the page has a heading that says on-site supervisor. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay. And towards the bottom of the page, it says the on-site supervisor will have the knowledge and ability to train and provide hands-on assistance. Do you see that?
I do.
And then underneath that, it's a number of areas, correct?
Yes.
And Mr. Buford had that knowledge and ability, right?
He did.
Your Honor, if we could scroll to page 0011, or I guess 011.
Or I could do this. All right.
Thank you. That's fine. Towards the top of the page, Mr. Smith, it says safety and training. Do you see that?
I do.
And the contract says safety training is a top priority for associates building maintenance staff. And then underneath that, there's chemical equipment safety and training. Do you see that?
I do.
And this page of the contract is talking about the requirement for safety and for safety training of employees, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Buford had that, correct?
He did.
Your Honor, if we could go to ERD 014.
Wait 1 second. 014, you said?
Yes.
All right, we're on ERD 014. Where do you want to go?
The top is fine, Your Honor. Mr. Smith, do you see where it says the definition of a quote trained employee end quote is one who has? Do you see that?
I do.
And on this page, you're talking about the, what training is required for employees, correct?
Correct.
And that includes a 6-month probationary period
That is correct.
and also, or 1 year professional cleaning, correct?
That is correct.
And Mr. Buford had that as well, true?
That is correct.
If we go to the next page, Your Honor.
Right, we're now going to ERD 015. Go ahead.
Do you see the heading on-site training, Mr. Smith?
I do.
And underneath the heading, it says, after comprehensive off-site training, cleaners receive additional on-site training to familiarize them with building-specific procedures. Each worker is trained and closely monitored by a supervisor or lead worker for the first 2 months of cleaning. Do you see that?
I do.
And Mr. Buford met that requirement as well, true?
True.
And how long did Mr. Buford work for ABM?
Through the duration of the contract, which was 3 years. So he was employed the entire 3 years.
Did ABM's contract with Nextdoor Foundation end after 3 years?
Yeah, it did. It ended after 3 years.
Did ABM continue to provide cleaning services to Nextdoor Foundation after that initial 3-year period?
We did. We did renegotiate the contract.
Am I correct that there was sort of a bridge contract and then a fuller contract after that?
That is correct.
And so is it true that ABM still provides cleaning services today
We do.
for Nextdoor?
That is correct.
Now, at some point in time, Mr. Buford lost his employment with ABM, correct?
That is correct.
And who made that decision?
I made that decision.
And why did you make that decision?
Well, I would say over the duration of the contract, it didn't take a long time for me to realize why we were able to get this contract with Nextdoor Foundation. Prior to Associates Building Maintenance taking over, Nextdoor was spending, I want to say about 50% more than what the contract was that we negotiated with them. There was a lot that we were not informed on the front end by Nextdoor Foundation. For example, if you care to hear some of those examples, A big one was we were unaware that they had a total of 6 parking lots that needed to be salted and needed to be plowed. If there was even a speck of snow on their lots. And then we also were unaware that they had a curriculum between both of their buildings, which the curriculum focused on student to allow students to be self-sufficient. So they allow students to go into the restrooms by themselves, have their own paper towel, toilet paper, hand soap. So we were experiencing just a ton of waste on the floors and being flushed down the toilets. And they have a number of stalls in every single classroom, which we were unaware. We thought they had common bathrooms like your traditional schools, but in this case, over at Next Door, they have bathrooms in every single classroom in their building. Mainly the 29th Street location, the Capitol Drive location quickly followed suit, but it happened after we were already providing services. So we just couldn't afford the contract, to the point where, as myself, as the president of Associates Building Maintenance, I started to run it as a nonprofit organization. I didn't take any payroll or anything from Associates Building Maintenance for 3 consecutive years. And I'll be more than happy to show you guys those tax returns. But it was not a profitable contract, no way, shape, or form. And Mr. Buford, being my right hand and my friend, he was involved in a lot of these conversations with me, and you'll see it in those text messages that I'm sure you have that he's given you, and the ones that I'm sure that Attorney Baldwin gave you as well. But it was something that I was like, there's no way I can keep this contract going the way it is.
I think Mr. Stelton is frozen.
No, I'm not frozen. I'm moving. Your Honor, if we could pull up Exhibit 1 again, please, and turn to page ERD 07.
Okay, so we're still on 1. Or at least I am. I didn't actually, I just took it off screen so we wouldn't waste our time looking at it again. It makes the parties confused because the witness keeps looking at the exhibit when they're supposed to be answering questions and talking to you. All right, 1 second. All right, we are on Complaints Exhibit 1, ERD 007. And what part of it do you want this on?
Towards the bottom of half of the page, Your Honor.
That seems to be it. Transition plan?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Mr. Smith, can you see Exhibit 1?
I can.
And on page ERD 007, Associate Building Maintenance represents that it has contracts with the Milwaukee Academy of Science, correct?
That is correct.
The Business and Economics Academy, correct?
That is correct.
2 different locations?
That is correct.
2 different locations for the Urban Day School, correct?
That is correct.
Marva Collins, correct?
That is correct.
The Milwaukee Montessori School, correct?
That is correct.
And St. Rose Catholic School, correct?
That is correct.
So ABM was working on more than just the contract for Next Door, correct?
No.
So between
That's
2000,
correct. Okay, you said no to his question. So the answer is yes, it's correct. We had other contracts. Correct?
That's not
No.
what he said, Your Honor.
No, that's not what I said.
Okay, I need the answer then, please.
So these are schools that we have taken care of over the course of 23 years. The majority of these schools, by the time we took over Next Door Foundation, was no longer they were no longer entities. They don't exist anymore. For example, the Business and Economics Academy, both of their locations have since closed down. They were Edison schools out of New York. They have schools here in the city of Milwaukee, but neither one of those schools survived. So they had dissolved those schools, and the same for Urban Day Schools, and then the same for Marva Collins, and then the same for St. Rose, St. Leo. So a lot of those, so the majority of those schools, when we put together this contract, this was just showing some of the schools that we had taken care of over the course of time. But by the time we took over Next Door Foundation, these schools had already been dissolved.
Okay, great. Thank you. I appreciate it. I didn't understand that. Go ahead.
Sure.
Am I correct that during the period of time during the first contract with Next Door Foundation, that was the only contract you were working on?
No, Milwaukee Academy of Science was probably our longest tendered contract. We've taken care of Milwaukee Academy of Science, and we still to this day since early 2000.
And am I also correct that you had other contracts that you were working on at that time?
No,
So it was just the two Next Door and the Milwaukee Academy of Science?
that is correct.
We can take down Exhibit 1, Your Honor.
All right, great. Go ahead.
Am I correct, Mr. Smith, that you did not decide to fire Mr. Buford for poor work performance?
That is correct.
Mr. Buford never received a negative work evaluation, true?
That is correct.
My understanding is that you replaced Mr. Buford with Valerie Serrano. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What was Ms. Serrano's job at Associate Building Maintenance before Mr. Buford was fired?
Sure. Ms. Serrano she was actually over all of the employees. She was I would call her my right hand. I mean, she had the experience to do absolutely everything to run Associates Building Maintenance.
Was she a professional cleaner?
Absolutely.
Did Ms. Serrano have the requisite specific training on the job site at Next Door?
Absolutely. Her experience would exceed any employee that I had working in any school building, period.
You did fire Ms. Serrano, correct?
No, I didn't fire Ms. Serrano. Ms. Serrano, well, it was twofold. I mean, from Associates Building Maintenance, she resigned, but she worked for another company and she was terminated from that company.
You are aware that Ms. Serrano filed for unemployment benefits, correct?
That is correct. Absolutely.
And you opposed those unemployment benefits, correct?
No, I did not. As a matter of fact, she's getting unemployment today.
Following a contested hearing, correct?
No. So here's the, I mean, I don't know if it's okay for me to explain what happened with Valerie.
If nobody
Serrano.
stops you, go ahead.
Okay,
I just want to ask you if you contested it or
object.
not.
I'm going to object because I don't mind him asking about Ms. Serrano and her experience, but I don't think we need to get into
but
aspects.
But attorney, I wasn't going to get into the aspect of why she's no longer with me. I was getting to the aspect of why, you know, when Mr. Sultan talks about the hearing, I was going to go into the person that followed that I hired behind Valerie Serrano. She was murdered. She was my executive assistant, my really good friend, and she was murdered at my place of business. And when we were receiving information in regards to Valerie Serrano and her collecting unemployment, there was a void in our response. There was a void in about 4 months because I lost Crystal. Crystal was my executive assistant, and she lost her life in my place of business. And I was not in a place where I was responding to and checking mail and things of that nature. So that's why you're probably coming to the conclusion that that I didn't respond to Valerie Serrano's unemployment.
Well, I want to make sure my question was different, Mr. Smith. I just want to know whether you contested Ms. Serrano's unemployment.
So on the front end, yes. for one company, though. She worked for two separate companies.
And both of them you own?
Yes, ma'am.
And what are those two companies, please?
Associates Building Maintenance and the Brownstone Social Lounge.
And you objected to Ms. Serrano getting UI benefits from which company?
Well, she's getting benefits from both companies.
Okay, but I thought you said you objected on the front end to one of them.
So on the front end to the Brownstone Social Lounge.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Sultan.
Thank you. Mr. Smith, when did you learn that Natasha Moore had filed a lawsuit against the Nextdoor Foundation?
I don't remember the exact date.
We already did this question a long time ago at the very beginning. We looked at that exhibit and he read it from his affidavit.
I'm sorry, my question was different. When did he learn about the lawsuit that she filed?
Oh, the lawsuit. That's right. Okay. I apologize. You're right. Go ahead.
Did you learn about Ms. Moore's lawsuit before Associates Building Maintenance was sued?
By who?
I never knew Associates Building Maintenance was sued.
Did there come a point in time in which you learned that the Nextdoor Foundation filed a lawsuit against ABM?
I wasn't aware of that.
Do you recall being deposed in a lawsuit by me?
I recall. I'm not sure. I never looked at it. I never looked at what we were dealing with as a lawsuit against Associates Building Maintenance because it would have no merits. Associates Building Maintenance didn't do anything wrong. So I mean, I guess that's what my.
So, yeah, and it's not a trick question, Mr. Smith. I just want to know, was it your understanding that Nextdoor had filed a lawsuit against Associate Building Maintenance?
I was never aware of that.
Okay. But you were aware that at some point in time you were asked to give a deposition, correct?
That is correct. Absolutely, yes.
And you recall in that deposition testifying that you believe that there was a conspiracy between Mr. Buford, Ms. Moore, and Mr. Abdullah, right?
That is correct.
And you testified that that you did not believe Ms. Moore or Mr. Buford, correct?
What I said was when the question was brought up in regards to, and this was long after we had been dealing with the lawsuit against Mrs. Moore and Nextdoor Foundation. What I said was after I had gone through the process of investigating over the course of time, things just didn't line up. And then when I talked to, all parties involved, they were all really good friends. So did I have questions in regards to if it was, if it was real, if all these events really happened the way they said it happened? I absolutely questioned that. But now on the front end, when I seen the picture that he sent her right away, I was spot on. I mean, I was on it. I wanted, I reached out to the president and the vice president in the middle. I think it was, 7:30, 8 o'clock at night when I reached out to him and just told him that, hey, this picture was sent to me by Mrs. Moore. It was a picture of Mr. Abdullah, and that whole thing just didn't sit well with me whatsoever. But then after I had an opportunity to meet with both Willie Buford and Mrs. Moore, and some of the things that they were saying and or the lack of what they were saying, was it disturbing to me? Absolutely.
Let me ask the question this way, Mr. Smith. At some point in time, you did not believe Miss Moore and Mr. Buford's allegations, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And that was before Mr. Buford was terminated, correct?
That was before Mr. Buford was terminated. That is correct.
And that is also after Mr. Abdullah was fired by Nextdoor Foundation, true?
I'm not sure because I was never informed as to when he was terminated. Um, I feel like he should have been terminated right away. But every time I turned around, he was right back in the building.
Did there come a point in time in which you learned that he was no longer with Nextdoor Foundation?
Actually, no one ever told me that he was no longer employed by the school. So I didn't know if he was working over at one of their other locations because I knew they had 3 locations and we only serviced 2.
You do understand that Mr. Abdullah's job was the director of facilities and maintenance for Nextdoor, correct?
Yes, but for some time after the allegations came out, they would have him work at a different site away from my staff and Natasha Moore.
But you're aware that Mr. Abdullah was an integral part of negotiating the contract with your company, right?
Objection, ask and
He
answer.
wasn't. He absolutely was not.
Did your staff had frequent communication with Mr. Abdullah as a part of doing their jobs?
I would say I probably had more insight than my staff would have had with him. He was more. He was not no disrespect to anyone, but he wasn't an entry level thinker. He was, just like myself. I wouldn't know who the staff were, who the teachers were in the buildings. I deal with higher level things, and that was Akalana as well. But I knew that he had a relationship with Natasha Moore and Willie Buford. I knew that those 3 had a personal relationship outside of the school, so they may have had more interactions, but I'm sure that my other staff would probably say that they probably had little to no interaction with him.
And Mr. Smith, what was the staffing at Nextdoor Foundation during the 2017-2020 contract?
In regards to what?
What was the staffing, the number of supervisors to subordinates physically at the locations?
Physically at the locations, you would have Valerie Serrano would be in the building quite often. She's the one that kind of delegated to everyone what their responsibilities were, things of that nature. Then you would have Willie Buford, who worked directly under Valerie Serrano. And then you would have Natasha Moore, who worked on second shift. And then when we first started in 2017, we also had Delmy Borjas, who also was that first shift person. And she was under Valerie, but right over but I would say right over Willie Buford. And
Who is this person?
her name is Delmy Borjas.
Can you
She's
spell,
with me now.
please?
I'm sorry.
Can you spell the first and last name, please?
Yes, ma'am. First name is Delmi. Last name is Borjas, Borjhos.
And what was her position, please?
Delmy she's been a supervisor with me now for just, I'd say right under 20 years now.
You said at the very beginning she was involved somehow with Nextdoor Foundation?
She was really involved with him on the front end, just to create structure and things of that nature.
Go ahead, Mr. Sultan.
Mr. Smith, let me just sharpen the question. What I'd like to learn is how many total employees did you have physically working in Nextdoor's building during the 2017-2020 contract at any one time?
Which building? There were 2 buildings. Which building do you want?
Buildings.
Sure, I'll take both. Were there a total of 5 employees, a total of 4 employees? I mean, what are we talking about?
Can you talk about the Capitol Drive first, please, Mr.?
Oh my God, it would be really difficult for me to tell you, but I would say exceeding 8 to 10 employees per building. But then you would have David, Rich, Mark. You would have what we call special assignments employees. They would also be in the building. So it's difficult to say on a back then how many employees were in the building, but it was a significant amount of employees in the building in comparison to some of the other schools that we serviced over the course of the last 25 years.
So it's not uncommon to see 8 to 10 ABM employees at one time at the Capitol Drive location.
That is correct.
And that was true for both shifts?
Not for both shifts. First shift, probably not so many unless we have special assignments employees in the building. So if we have special assignments employees in the building that were addressing some of the concerns of the school or some of the residual things that we have to address, you could see upwards of 8 people in the building on first shift, but most definitely on second shift.
At the time that Mr. Buford was terminated, did you also terminate all the people who were beneath him?
No, I didn't. Some people lost their jobs. It wasn't just Willie Buford. I know
Sure,
that.
but my question is, and maybe that was, let me ask the question this way. At the time that you fired Mr. Buford, did you fire subordinates who had less years of experience with ABM?
Yes, I think there was 2 employees.
At the time that you fired Mr. Buford, did you keep employees who had less years of experience than Mr. Buford?
Yes.
How many?
Not 100% sure.
Those are all the questions that I have, Your Honor.
Okay, I didn't understand the question that you asked regarding the reasons for the termination of Mr. Buford. If you want to try that again, please.
Would you like me to re-ask the question, Your Honor, or is that directed to Mr. Smith?
No, I'm asking you because you asked it in a very specific and kind of adverse way that I assume you had a reason you didn't want him to expound, but the way in which it was asked made it difficult for me to understand what his answers then was. So I'm asking you to do it again.
Sure.
Mr. Smith, please tell Her Honor why you terminated Mr. Buford.
Sure. Mr. Buford employment was terminated. It was solely because of the expenditures associated with Next Door Foundation. So what I'd asked Mr. Buford on the front end when we had our conversation was that would he be willing to go over to Milwaukee Academy of Science? He didn't want to go over to Milwaukee Academy of Science. I had absolutely no choice but to bring Valerie Serrano back out of the office and into the building so that she can focus on how we can make the contract a profitable contract going into negotiations, because we kept Willie Buford all the way up until the end of the current contract. I had no desire, absolutely no desire, to sign a new contract with Next Door Foundation. It was extremely difficult for us when it comes to the vehicles that they required us to have to make sure that the parking lots would be plowed, to make sure that we can salt their parking lots, and just hitting on that. We had 2 different lawsuits that we had to deal with from people slipping and falling, and mainly their staff. So our insurance went up significantly. With us having a great mod rate for 20 years, we ended up losing that, and our insurance ended up going up because our insurance had to pay out on 2 different claims of teachers slipping and falling. And it just got so expensive to maintain their facilities to where it wasn't worth it. The contract, it was a one-sided contract. It didn't benefit Associates Building Maintenance in any way whatsoever. So so Willie Buford worked with me. We were trying our best to figure out a way and what the cost would be to make the contract a profitable contract. But throughout that entire time, Willie just did not show me what I needed in regards to Willie, how much are you guys ordering? Because I wasn't actually in the building. So I would reach out to Willie Buford and I would say to him, Willie, how much toilet paper are we using? How much paper towel are we using? And then he was the one that reached out to me via text message and said to me, well, did you know about the curriculum that they have, allowing the kids to use as much as they want to use, and then the teacher would use that as a learning experience for the kids. And I was like, are you kidding me? So then, but he couldn't tell me what that was. And then COVID happened. And I was talking to Valerie Serrano in the school, and I said, Valerie, I got to get you in this building so you could find out exactly where we can save money in this contract, or I'm letting Nextdoor Foundation go, which I had every intentions on letting them go. I had no desire whatsoever. It was more of a headache for me than anything else. I had no desire to be a part of Nextdoor Foundation, none whatsoever. None whatsoever. So Willie Buford was let go because I had to bring Valerie Serrano in to assist in trying to find out how we could save money, because it was not a financially beneficial contract for either party. And I was able to see why we were able to save them over $50,000 a month, $50,000 per month, because they were not transparent with us on the front end. But I needed Valerie Serrano to go into that building to figure out what in the heck was going on with their curriculum and why it was so expensive. Because I have 24 years experience being in school buildings, and I have never dealt with the expenditures that I dealt with in any school building I've been affiliated with until I had gone over to Nextdoor Foundation. It was a lopsided contract that wasn't beneficial, and I needed someone from my office that understood exactly what needed to be understood to make sure that if we negotiated, that it would not be a one-sided contract, and we were able to fulfill that obligation from the previous contract. If you've seen the previous contract and the contract that we have now, you would understand why I made the decision that I made. It is now a contract that's beneficial to both parties.
Okay, and just to be clear, you said that you did offer Mr. Buford to work at, did you say Milwaukee Academy?
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
And can you tell me what happened, how that was done?
Well, he didn't want to go to Milwaukee Academy of Science because his brother, whom lived with him, and so to make a long story short, the beneficial thing with bringing Willie Buford in was they all worked. Willie Buford and Natasha Moore and two of the other employees that work over at Nextdoor Foundation, they all had went to school together and worked for another company together. So they all had a lot of experience working with one another. The commitment was there to one another, and that benefited me bringing all of them in, because we didn't have to build a camaraderie over at that 53rd Street location. A camaraderie was already there from individuals that had worked together for the same company that went under. They had all worked together, and Willie Buford just brought them all over to Associates Building Maintenance. So that really benefited me, because I didn't have to go out and solicit other individuals to come in and work in the building. We already had a built-in employment, built-in employees to go right into this building and offer the same services that they had worked for the previous company. But I understand.
But my question was very specific. How did you offer a position to Mr. Buford at the Milwaukee Academy of Science? By telephone?
He didn't want to leave because of the commitment that he
But you
felt
said
like
you
he had
offered
with
it
them.
to him. I need to know when you communicated that and when he told you no.
So about a week before, so Milwaukee Academy of Science was one of they were the last school to take off during the pandemic. So I reached out to Willie Buford to ask him if he would go over to Milwaukee Academy of Science, because he was a great asset to me. So I wanted Willie Buford to go over to Milwaukee Academy of Science. He didn't want to leave because of the camaraderie with all these individuals that he brought over to Nextdoor Foundation.
At the time that you made this offer, did you tell him that his position with the Nextdoor Foundation buildings would be over if he didn't take the position at Milwaukee Academy?
Absolutely. He knew it 100%. Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Go ahead then, please, Mr. Sultan.
I don't have any further questions, Your Honor.
Okay. And Mr. Baldwin, are you just going to call Mr. Smith in your case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor. I think that would be appropriate at lunchtime. I also would like to call another witness out of order so that we can get that person relieved if possible.
Okay, and who is that, please?
A witness from Next Door Foundation. Her name is up here. Ms. Porter.
Okay. And you want her to testify when?
Well, after I'm assuming since it's 12:17, we're going to go to lunch. But after lunch, I would call her first before I dealt with with my client, Mr. Smith. I'd also would make a motion for dismissal based if the complainant's case in chief is done.
We're not going to dismiss. The commission frowns on that and ends up just sending them back. And I don't see any point in wasting all of our time having to go to them and them saying, we want you to finish the hearing. So
I'm just making the motion on the record, Your Honor.
no. And besides that, Mr. Sultan hasn't actually decided that he's done. At least he hasn't told us so. So, Mr. Smith, I appreciate your help in here. And Mr. Baldwin will be calling you again during the respondent's case. If he chooses to, he may decide not to. Who knows? That's up to him. But at this point, we're done with your testimony, and I appreciate it. And then, Mr. Sultan, are you calling any other witnesses?
Yes, I do intend to recall Mr. Buford. I believe
Okay.
his testimony will be brief.
You're with respect to what Mr. Smith said?
Yes.
Okay, and are you asking to call him now, or can we wait until after lunch?
I'm happy to wait till after lunch. That's fine.
Okay, then we'll do that after lunch. And so we'll do that after lunch. And what's your position as respect to, assuming you're going to be done then after Mr. Buford's recalled, correct?
That is correct.
So then, do you have a problem or concern with Ms. Porter testifying? Did you need her to testify right after lunch, Mr. Baldwin, or is it okay that we have Mr. Buford first?
Well, I'm sure she would like to be done as soon as possible. However, your court would, however Your Honor want to handle it.
I don't know what the issue is. Why is she needing to be called now? Does she have like a pressing appointment and she won't be available later today, or she won't be available tomorrow? What is the reason for this?
Well, no, we just hope that she would have been able to get her testimony in before the morning ended. So that's why I'm not pressing for a certain ruling at this point in time. So if Your Honor, I have no problem with Mr. Sultan finishing his case in chief before we call her. Okay,
then we'll do that. All right, take a lunch break. It's 12:20. Is it enough time if we come back by like 1:05? Is that good? Does that work for you, Mr. Sultan?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And Mr. Baldwin?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, everybody take a break, turn off your cameras, and mute
Excuse me.
yourself. And I will end. Yes?
Your Honor, are you expecting me to be back on, or?
You're going to probably be called by your attorney. You should talk to him about
Okay.
whether he's going to call you. Okay?
I mean, I can stay on. I don't have a problem with it.
I mean, that's up to you, between you and your attorney, but he did say he was planning to call you again.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, so again, mute yourself and turn off your camera, and I will end the recording.